Benjamin Albright, NFL Underground. We'll talk today about the Phantom Football Forum. Designed to give you greater access to me. You get the latest intel, insider information, rumors, news, notes, injury information, Vegas lines, fantasy football, power rankings. Watch football games live with me. Phantom Football Forum. Only $1 for your first month if you sign up today. Facebook.com/WatchPhantom. Link right here. Come join us today.
What's up, everybody? I'm Temkin. We're live on Phantom, the New World Order of Sports Media. It's showtime, just after noon, right here on in the Central Time Zone. If you're watching in the East, it's obviously 1 o'clock, 11 o'clock Mountain Time, but you didn't really come here for time updates. You came here to discuss the latest in sports. We've got a lot to get to today. A lot centered around the Spurs and Kawhi Leonard. Surprise, surprise, DJ Carpenter. But there seems to be more movement when it comes to the Kawhi Leonard discussion, so more on that coming up. I want to thank everybody for joining us, whether you're watching on the Phantom Facebook page at facebook.com/WatchPhantom or on the San Antonio Spurs Spirit page. Tony Thames says first. What up, Tony? Also on the Temkin radio page, no matter where you're watching from, make sure to post your comments, hit the share button. Greg Zuniga says, hello, my friend. What up, Greg? How are you? Also broadcasting live on Twitch, on YouTube, and Periscope. So no matter where you are, I will find you. And then we'll find your comments. All right. So yesterday was the 4th of July. Happy 4th of July, everybody. How'd it go? Everybody have a good time? Cool. And I watched Joey Chestnut consume 74 hot dogs in 10 minutes. And thank you to Darren Ravel, who tweeted out the nutritional facts of what 74 hot dogs means, 21,000 calories. You could, go through the gist of it there. Joey Chestnut broke it seems like every year he breaks his own record. So he had 74 this year, which broke his record of 72 last year, which broke his record of 70 in 2016, which broke his record of 69 hot dogs in 2013, which broke his record of 68 hot dogs in 2012. So since 2012, in the last 6 years, he has improved by a sum of 6 total hot dogs in 10 minutes. You also might have noticed that he is the record holder for like 100 other food items, and I try to write them all down. Like that's not even all of the things that Joey Chestnut is the record holder for. Isn't that insane? I mean, ice cream sandwiches, horseshoe, I don't even know what horseshoe sandwiches are, grilled cheese sandwiches, corned beef sandwiches, pulled pork sandwiches, pulled pork slider, pulled pork glazed donuts. So here's my question to you, and post this in the comments. Joey Chestnut's a good dude. I've interviewed him on Phantom. I Googled his net worth. $800,000 is his net worth. So best case, if you go into competitive eating, best case scenario is you're Joey Chestnut. If you go into competitive eating, the best case scenario is that you're Joey Chestnut and you are like unbelievably dominant to the point of you're consistently breaking your own records every single year. And you're still worth less than $1 million. Now, $800,000 is a good net worth. It's a good living to make by eating. But one, this can't be healthy. It cannot be a healthy lifestyle. And like he's in ridiculous shape. If you've ever seen him, like he's got a six-pack. He looks ripped. He's in good shape. But it just can't be good for you. There's no way that this is a healthy lifestyle. And so my question to you is, would you want to be like people would love to be famous actors or actresses, or people always want to be famous athletes. But this to me is it's like the one that's I don't know that anybody would actually want to be in real life. That's what I'm asking you to comment with. Would you actually ever want to be Joey Chestnut, who is famous? Corey Cole says broke his kidneys. It just doesn't look like a healthy lifestyle, and it looks like an uncomfortable lifestyle at that too. And one of our original partners with Phantom was the Major League Eating, George Shea, and so I went to and covered a hot dog competition at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio last summer, and just being there and filming it made me want to throw up. So watching it is kind of fun, and it's like that's the thing is you have to be as dominant. Larry Manick says he runs 10 miles every week. He's in great shape. He's got a six-pack. He is in really good shape, as was Kobayashi, who's the other known dominant competitor when it comes to major, competitive eating. It's just, who wouldn't want to be Joey Chestnut, Joseph Klein asks. I'm asking you, would you want to be Joey Chestnut? His net worth is $800,000. He doesn't, I don't see how it's at all this can't be a healthy lifestyle. Like, this just cannot be a healthy lifestyle. That's all I have to say about it. Is he's got to be shaving years off of his life. He's worth $800,000. He's world famous. But remember, like, anytime somebody sees him, they're probably like, "Can you like chug a beer, or can I have a hot dog?" Like, he is basically known as that exact thing. Post how many hot dogs you ate yesterday. I ate a couple. By the way, does anybody even know what's in hot dogs? And again, just to reiterate, this isn't even the full list of the things that he's a world champion at. And I don't know. So that's all I had to say about Joey Chestnut. Hope everybody enjoyed the festivities. David Alejandre says, switch it out to tacos and watch the competitors triple. No, tacos is one of the things. He's the burrito champion. He's the long form burrito champion, David. I don't even know what that means. What's long form? Does that mean like an hour? You have an hour to eat like 75 burritos? Yeah, exactly. Larry Manick says, hell no. I like food and enjoying it in moderation. 100% agree. Is Joey Chestnut the most famous Jewish athlete of my generation? Is Joey Chestnut Jewish? I don't think he is. Carolina taking the house. What up? I'm exactly where Larry Mannix is. Like, food is to be enjoyed, not to be scarfed down in a competitive manner. But that's just my piece. All right, I'm Ari Temkin. This is Phantom. We are the new world order of sports media. We're delivering sports content to these social channels where you already are: Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Periscope, yada yada yada. And the big story continues to be Kawhi Leonard, the San Antonio Spurs. I know TJ Carpenter will make fun of me because I talk about Kawhi Leonard seemingly every day. But the question that I want to pose today is, are the Spurs playing this situation wrong based upon the trade leverage that they have versus, bringing, like, where they're at right now? Have they played this situation wrong? Post in the comments. No matter where you're watching, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on Twitch, if you're watching on Periscope. TJ Carpenter says it's amazing. Is it amazing that I talk about Kawhi Leonard every day, or is it the hot dog competition? What's amazing? And Chris Leha says, watching that context makes me want to vomit. It's gross AF, man. Ha ha ha. Yeah, when you're there too, it's even tougher to watch him scarf it down. But it's a great celebration of Americana and gluttony and all the things that go along with it. All right, so here's the question. And hit the share button, no matter where you're watching from. Hit the share button. Help us out. And Greg Zuniga wants to know if the Warriors signed Joey Chestnut. I do not believe so. Tony Thames asks for an update on the situation. All right, so Dusty Garza, who runs the great Spurs report page on Facebook, he pulled some audio from the Woj podcast with Bobby Marks from Tuesday, July 3rd, and there's a couple of quotes from it that I want to play for you. So here's the first one.
Where do you think the Spurs' leverage is right now?
I think it's not as high as they probably think it is, and you are not going to win the trade. I mean, in the reality, as far as an all-star, it's been proven that what you can get back in return is not the value of what the player is. I think if you wait it out, the player loses value as the weeks go by. I think getting into the season, it's movable, but I think what you can get in the summer, is a lot more appealing, because maybe there is an opportunity for Boston or Philadelphia, if they think, where you have a whole year to recruit him, to keep him there, instead of come January or February. Now you only have 4 months. But I think if there's a deal for San Antonio that makes sense, I think you do it now and you don't wait until the regular season.
That's former front office executive, current NBA analyst Bobby Marks on the Woj podcast. And again, thank you to Dusty Garza from the Spurs Report Facebook page for cutting up the audio, the audio form of that. Now, I have another Woj cut to play for you in a second, but let's just react initially to what Bobby Marks posted there, or said there. And that is basically that the Spurs don't have as much leverage now as they believe that they do, and that they're not going to be able to get what's considered fair market value for Kawhi Leonard at this situation. And so, like, that to me is, so first and foremost, I think that was always the case, right? Like, if Kawhi Leonard is one of the top 3 players in the NBA or top 5 players in the NBA, they're not going to return a player better than him. So, like, it was always the case that they weren't going to get, quote-unquote, fair market value for him. That I think is an important component of this. Is I don't think that that's changed. Certainly, they may have worse leverage now because, well, I mean, the Lakers get assurances from LeBron, so they get LeBron, and LeBron says, don't go out and make a move for Kawhi right now. We can get him next year. And because Kawhi has said he wants to play and sign long-term for the Lakers, that diminishes his value for the Philadelphia 76ers, the Boston Celtics. Like, I get all of that. So it sort of comes down to, do you believe, and I'd love for you to post in the comments, do you think the Spurs have played the Kawhi situation wrong? So we just heard the quote from Bobby Marks there, and he's saying that the Spurs don't have as much leverage as they believe that they have, and that they have – that they're not going to be able to get fair market value for him. And then here's the quote from Woj that I think is very interesting too. So again, thank you to Dusty Garza from the Spurs Report page for posting these quotes from the Woj podcast for the Spurs Report's Facebook page.
I don't think the Spurs are going to offer him that $219 million until they have come to some kind of understanding. Like, you're not offering that contract to somebody who's angry with you, and there's no point to it, and that's why I believe it hasn't happened yet.
Well, and what I'm learning with these high numbers is that when you sign it, it basically becomes an untradeable contract, because you're paying a guy $40 to $45 million. So, could you imagine having a player who's unhappy and is making $40 million?
And here's what one team said to me. He's a top 5 player, top 3 player, wherever you want to put him. That's what he was. You saw him before he missed last season. And they say, what if he comes back and he's a top 20 player? Still really good, an all-star, perhaps, but not all-world. And now, but we're going to have to pay him like he's all-world. We're going to have to pay him, you trade, let's say he's traded, what's his starting salary? Mid-30s, right?
Oh, yeah, 30, 33, 34 million.
You don't want to pay that for a top 20 player. You'll pay that for a top 10 player, but if he's top 20 or top 30, and nobody knows the toll that quad injury has taken on his body, that he's going to play, but will he be diminished in some way? And I do think perhaps his value could rise again by getting on the court and being the player that he was. But you're really going to play this out in the training camp, and it'll hang over everything they do. To me, it's hard to imagine him walking back in the doors. I think it's hard for him to imagine walking back in, but he is under contract, and if he wants to get paid next year, he's going to have to show up.
All right, so we have Bobby Marks saying the Spurs don't have as much leverage as they believe that they have, and then Woj on his podcast saying, that they're not going to offer him the $221 million Supermax because he's unhappy, but at the same time, there's it's an untradeable Supermax, so like it's weird because it seems like, and most of the media seems to be doing this. What up, Eric Salinas, Joe Deasy watching what's going on, everybody. Hit the share button if you wouldn't mind as we talk about Kawhi Leonard. And the question I'm asking everybody watching this, no matter where you're watching this on, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, no matter where you are, post your comments. Do you think the Spurs have handled this situation incorrectly? Have they handled this situation wrong? Todd Tangenin on the Ari Temkin radio page says, I believe Woj is wrong. Why do you think that, Todd? And I'm just trying to cycle through, make sure I'm not missing any of the comments here. Armando says, Kawhi to Lakers, King James needs some more rings. Warriors, thumbs down. Look, here's – and I want to make sure I get to everybody's comments, so apologies with that on that for a second. But the thing that I find sort of interesting about this is that there seems to be sort of contradictory things coming out of this about, Kawhi being so good and obviously so appealing to so many teams, and yet at the same time, as Woj brought up, all of the concerns about, well, how is he going to come back from this quad injury? Nancy Sanchez says both sides could have handled better. Expand on that from the Spurs' vantage point. What do you think the Spurs in particular could have done better? And especially, let's just focus more specifically on this most recent situation where the Spurs haven't pulled the trigger on a trade. Had they traded him to the Lakers before LeBron signed, would they have been able to get what they wanted? Ingram, Kuzma, future draft considerations. And it's funny because I've seen multiple outlets basically saying, the Spurs are asking for far too much while still acknowledging that Kawhi Leonard's one of the 5 best players in the NBA. So it's just so bizarre that the Spurs are asking for too much. Well, how would they be asking for too much if Kawhi Leonard is still one of the best two-way players in the game? And I say one of the best because I still think LeBron's the best two-way player in the game. But how could they be asking for too much when we still think that Kawhi Leonard is one of the best two-way players in the game? Carlos Ortega says, trade him, end of story. He turns his back on his team. Yeah, but Carlos, what the offers right now seem to completely be diminished relative to what they might have been a month ago or so. That's the problem. Is what are you going to trade him for? You're not going to trade him for a low ball offer. Not when you still control his rights for the next year. Andrew Archer says, why do you think Kawhi Leonard hasn't come out to clarify his feelings? Andrew, because he doesn't want to talk publicly. He does not want to talk publicly. That's why. So, he's had controversy surrounding him for the last 10 months. He's spoken publicly twice, and he said about 15 sentences the 2 times he's spoken. He doesn't want to speak to the media. He is shy and doesn't want the spotlight. And that guy apparently wants to go play in L.A. for the Showtime Lakers, which makes absolutely categorically no sense to me whatsoever. But yeah, he hasn't come out to clarify his feelings because he doesn't want to speak publicly. John Dyer says they're waiting for L.A. to offer Kuzma or Philly to offer Fultz. That's what I find interesting. And if you think that, then the answer is, are the Spurs playing the Kawhi situation wrong? The answer is yes, because then they could have pulled the trigger before LeBron signed the deal, and they probably would have gotten Kuzma, Ingram, and future draft considerations. The question being, are the Spurs playing this Kawhi situation wrong? The answer is they probably haven't maximized his value. They probably haven't, been able to get the most from him, because it seemed like before LeBron signed with the Lakers, that was probably when they could have gotten the most for him. Nancy Sanchez says they should have acted as Spurs always had before CIA pop. Yeah, you're probably right about that. But I also think there was so much frustration from all, because here's where it goes back to. Kawhi Leonard, his uncle and his agent gave the Spurs a date that he was going to come back. And that was the date, if you recall, that Lisa Salters from ABC reported. He'll be back on this date. And that was the date the Spurs had gotten, that was when he was going to be back. And when he didn't come back that date, that's when the Spurs had that closed-door meeting, because everybody was like, what's the deal, dude? Are you coming back or not? So I think there was just this unbelievable frustration, and it kind of boiled to the top, and that's where, the Spurs sort of had that closed-door meeting where they're like, dude, are you with this team or not? And look, from Tony Parker's perspective, from Manu Ginobili's perspective, they're looking at this thinking, we have given up so much for this organization, for this team. They've, it was the Tim Duncan ethos of, less minutes, less shots, less acclaim, less star power. It was all that stuff that Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, they felt like we paid our dues to make this thing work. Why shouldn't you? And I can understand their frustration from that vantage point. Adrian Campbell says a bad deal will ruin them. I think waiting till you can't anymore is best. Don't rush. I think someone will jump sooner or later. Alex Morris said, what do you think of the idea that Pop sent Manu and Parker to say those things about him? And I know, I mean, look, did Pop say to Manu and Tony to speak out publicly? It's hard for me to believe that he didn't influence them whatsoever, because Pop controls the narrative inside the Spurs locker room. He controls the things that people say. Now, with that being said, I think Tony Parker spoke out of turn a few times throughout the course of his career. And I think it was just general frustration from Ginobili and Parker, who, again, were like, dude, you're just getting here. We've done things for this organization for so many different years that is so much I think from their vantage points, from Ginobili and Parker, they're looking at this like, do you know the things that we've done? We've sacrificed, we've given up, the money, the pay cuts we've taken, the minutes. Mama Ginobili's like, I came off the bench in my prime. Doesn't that mean anything to you? And for Kawhi, he's like, no, it doesn't, old man. I don't care. Alex Morris says, what do you think of the idea? Oh, I already got to that. Jason Roldan says, if he doesn't want, I don't know what that means. He should play for the Showtime Aries. Neville says he needs to talk. I agree with that, but that's like, and this gets to the crux of this entire thing, right? Like, he wants to go play in Philly or LA, and he can't even talk publicly in San Antonio. That just, like, that's why, and I've said this before, I said it on ESPN radio last night when I was hosting with Aaron Goldhammer. Like, we heard in San Antonio, the media in San Antonio heard rumors about Kawhi Leonard wanting to go back to LA for a couple of years. But it was hard to believe those rumors, because this is a guy that created this perception of him that he was perfect for San Antonio. So, like, the guy who doesn't want to be a star, who doesn't want to talk to the media, that guy wants to go to a big city. That was the thing that I thought was really hard to understand. Like, that's why, even though we heard rumblings that he wanted to go play for the Lakers, wanted to go back home, is the quote that we heard, we never thought that was true, because of all the things that he's created, the perception of himself that he's created, that he's shy, soft-spoken, doesn't want the spotlight, doesn't want to speak publicly a lot. So, I mean, Neville, I agree. How is that guy who doesn't want to talk to the media in San Antonio, how is that going to go play for the Lakers? Seems ridiculous. Jenna Garcia, if he is the question, he hasn't played in a year, how could he still be considered one of the best? John Dyer hasn't, all reports indicated LA hasn't offered Kuzma and Ingram together. Yeah, I think, at least the latest reports were that Philly was unwilling to offer Embiid, Fultz, or Simmons, that the Lakers were unwilling to offer basically any of their current players, which seems ridiculous. Rafa Morales says he's busy right now getting in shape, and he didn't say he wants to leave in person. He hasn't said anything in person, other than like, hey, Kawhi, do you want to finish your career with San Antonio? Yeah, sure. I mean, you have to, at this point, take what Shams Charania and Jabari Young from the Express News are reporting, because they seem to be dialed into Kawhi Leonard's camp, meaning his uncle and his agent. So the things that they're reporting he wants out are coming from his people. And I think so much of this goes back to what Woj has been saying the entire time, which is the Spurs haven't offered him the Supermax. I think Liz Barcombe in the house. How are you, Liz? I think that's one of the most interesting things here is literally 29 other teams. Nemesis Esports Live says, what up, Ari, on Twitch? What up, Nemesis Esports Live? Everybody go follow Nemesis on Twitch. They're amazing. Just checking in on the San Antonio Spurs Spirit page. I just want to say what up to them. And then on Ari Temkin Radio. If you are commenting on this stream, check it out on Facebook.com/Watch Phantom. That's where it's easiest for me to follow the comments, as they go on all different pages. But no matter where you're watching, I'll try to get to all your comments at some point throughout. But hit the share button if you wouldn't mind. Alex Morris says, I think he became this introvert kind of person when he came into the Spurs. If you watch his highlights in San Diego State, he seemed far from it, screaming and pounding his chest. It's interesting. Look, I think, the introvert, I think there's, here's the thing about human beings. We're not always one or the other. Like, different circumstances make us more introverted or more extroverted. We are not just complete introverts. We are not just complete extroverts. Like some people that you might think to be the most outgoing, gregarious, extroverted people, given different circumstances, can be introverts, and vice versa. So I think there's probably truth in that. He came to the Spurs. He had to prove himself. He was playing with living legends, and Tim Duncan was there, and it was his team. And of course, the Spurs, mantra of not speaking out publicly, I think that all plays into it. But if he is not as introverted as the Spurs have made him out to be, then why is he still silent? That's the thing that I don't get, is this controversy has surrounded him for 10 months, and he just remains silent. And it's infuriating to everybody because it then forces everybody to sort of have to guess what is going on when it's clear that he's upset with the way the Spurs have handled the recent situations, and he's upset that he's not getting offered the Supermax. On YouTube, Kate says, don't bother giving up a ton of assets. He has 1 year left. If I were a GM, why would I give up the farm for Leonard if I'm not sure he'll re-sign? Well, I mean, that's a great point, Kate, and I think that the answer to that is, well, look at Paul George. So, I mean, let's operate under the assumption that he's going to go to the Lakers next year, which was the same thing given last year with Paul George. A year ago, it was the same exact thing with Paul George. He was going to go to the Lakers. That's where he wanted to go. But Oklahoma City took a leap of faith, right? And that's why I think the Spurs are holding out hope that at some point an East team is going to jump up and say, we've got to take this risk, because trading for Kawhi Leonard right now, it's a risk that he's not going to sign here long term, but there's also the potential that he comes here, he enjoys it, he's happy, we win, and he wants to stay here. And the Lakers didn't trade for Paul George last year because they thought they were getting him, and now they're not. And the same circumstance has presented itself this year. Now they have LeBron, so they're going to get star players to bring in the fold at some point. But they could be walking down the exact same road with Kawhi Leonard if they misplay this. And if you're an Eastern Conference team, why would you not be making a play right now for Kawhi because of the prospect that, it's not a guarantee that he's going to sign there long term. But look at Paul George. He wanted to go to LA. He was traded to Oklahoma City, and that situation wasn't great. I mean, they weren't even competing towards the top of the Western Conference. They lost in the first round, and he's still going to stay there. And it's Oklahoma City. So if you're Philly, why would you not make a better offer? It's Philadelphia. It's a big market. The reports are that he would sign there long term. He goes to the East. He's instantly on one of the best teams in the East. I mean, Philadelphia without Kawhi is one of the best teams in the East. If they make a trade for Kawhi and they don't give up Embiid or Simmons, and it's Fultz and future draft picks, then they're the best team in the East. Peter Garcia says, Spurs doing the right thing, being patient to think Philly is his eventual destination. Pete, you stole it. I mean, you didn't steal it. You said it before I said it. But agreed. Rafa Morales says, if he stays and signs that big contract, then what? Then what? What do you mean, then what? You mean like if he stays and they do offer him the Supermax, then what happens? Or then what? What? What do you mean, then what? Spurs fans will be happy and happy that he's back. Chris Bennett says, should the Spurs trade him now or hold on to him in the season? I think trading him now would be the worst move. You could argue that the Spurs played the situation wrong by not dealing him before LeBron signed, because LeBron signing with the Lakers seemed to hurt the leverage of the trade market for him. But I think given the circumstance now, there seems to have been, the trade market has seemed to subside substantially because of it. And Joseph Anderson in the house, what up, what up, what up? So, I mean, I think at this point, unless you get blown away by a deal, you hold on to him until you get blown away by a deal. And yeah, Chris Bennett points out Oklahoma City now has a $300 million payroll with an astounding $150 million luxury tax. It's ridiculous. But they're going to end up buying out Carmelo, and it won't be that much. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think how big of a tax bill they have, considering they were one and done last year. Omar Gonzalez in the San Antonio Spurs Spirit page gives me the laughing emoji. What up, Omar? And Todd Tangenin says the first day Kawhi could even sign the Supermax is July 16th. He would have until October 16th to make it official. I think he has until the first day of the regular season. I think the deadline is, and if that's October 16th, and I haven't looked. I don't know when the first day of the regular season is, but the deadline. You're right. The start of when the Spurs when he could even sign it is not until July 16th, and then he has until basically the start of the year in order to sign it. Corey Cole says, are the Spurs eyeing any big names still out there? See, that's the interesting thing here too, right? So because they're in this wait-and-see approach with Kawhi Leonard, obviously that's changing the way that they're going after the rest of their off-season period, right? So potential free agents, all those kinds of things now go on the back burner because they don't really know the situation with Kawhi. And I think they've done a good job to sort of retain some leverage within this situation by not offering him the Supermax. And that to me is the most intriguing component of this entire story, is the Spurs essentially not offering him the Supermax and holding on to him to see how he reacts to that situation. And look, we're a couple of months away from training camp starting. It's going to be very interesting to see if the Spurs don't pull a deal for him, and then he goes into training camp and he doesn't, they still don't offer the Supermax. Will he sit out? Because I do wonder what that would do to his market. Now you might say he sits out next year and the Lakers will still sign him next offseason. But I mean, missing basically two full seasons in the NBA and trying to come back and still be effective, it seems like just a very, very difficult situation, difficult thing to do. I'm Ari Temkin. This is Phantom. We are the New World Order of sports media, delivering live sports content to digital, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Periscope. No matter where you are, we are. So post your comments, hit the share button. I'm asking you, are the Spurs playing the Kawhi Leonard situation wrong? Do you think they've played, especially, we can go back through the entire season and rewrite history, talk about the ways in which they handled the situation wrong or right. I just mean, in particular, how they've handled this situation since the start of the offseason. Did they get a big-time offer from the Lakers or the Sixers or the Celtics at the beginning of the offseason, when they weren't really willing to entertain those deals? And how much has the market now diminished because LeBron James signs with the Lakers? So have they handled the situation most recently wrong? Joseph Anderson says, sounds like LA knew LeBron was coming, so offers have been minor. That's a good point. That maybe maybe the Lakers really never offered Kuzma and Ingram in future draft considerations because they probably always knew LeBron was coming, and maybe LeBron always gave them, the notice that, hey, I'm going to sign a 4-year deal, and you don't have to worry about making a short-term decision on trading up young assets for Kawhi. Let's build this thing the right way. So, I mean, maybe the Lakers, even before they signed LeBron, weren't really willing to make a major play for Kawhi because they knew that LeBron would be happy with the current roster, and that LeBron knew that, hey, at some point we're going to get great players anyways, whether it be the rest of this offseason, whether it be next offseason. So I think that's interesting. I still can't get over the fact that the Lakers let Julius Randle walk at $9 million a year for 2 years, but signed Rajon Rondo for 1 year, $9 million. It just seems ridiculous. Adrian Campbell, chiming in on the Phantom Facebook page, says, "Do we really love Fultz and what Philly have to offer? Fultz is a poor version of DeJounte Murray." I don't think that's fair. He was a former first overall pick. There's obviously major value in him, but there's obviously also major concerns about him, because of the shooting struggles that he went through last year and all that stuff. So I'm not to say that Fultz is an automatic star, but he was the first overall pick a couple of years ago. So there still is major value with him. Nancy Sanchez says, I think Spurs take that risk, but probably want a little more control of their player. Kawhi would be walking around for more than $80 million if you include tax in Texas compared to Texas and California. Adam Conley says trade him to Cleveland with no LeBron. Rafa Velasquez says life goes on without Kawhi. Or Renee Velasquez says life goes on without Kawhi. Yeah, but I mean, the Spurs are in a situation where they have to figure out the future of him. And look, I think Raja says it's Kawhi's choice. What's Kawhi's choice? Where he wants to go? What's Kawhi's choice? Post your comments. Hit the share button. I'm live every day at noon right here on Phantom, facebook.com/watch Phantom. You can also check us out at YouTube, on Twitch, on Periscope. Again, we are delivering live sports content to these social channels. All right, so the $221 million Supermax, which, again, if we go back to, and again, I want to thank Dusty Garza from the Spurs Report page for posting the video from the Woj podcast on there we go, on what Woj said, but here we go again.
I don't think the Spurs are going to offer him that $219 million until they have come to some kind of understanding. Like, you're not offering that contract to somebody who's angry with you, and there's no point to it, and that's why I believe it hasn't happened yet.
Well, and what I'm learning with these high numbers is that when you sign it, it basically becomes an untradeable contract because of, I mean, you're paying a guy $40 to $45 million. So, I mean, could you imagine having a player who's unhappy and is making $40 million?
And here's what one team said to me. He's a top 5 player, top 3 player, wherever you want to put him. That's what he was. You saw him before he missed last season. And they say, what if he comes back and he's a top 20 player? Still really good, an all-star, perhaps, but not all-world. And now, but we're going to have to pay him like he's all-world. We're going to have to pay him. You trade. Let's say he's traded. I mean, what's his starting salary? Mid-30s, right?
Oh yeah, 30, 33, 34 million.
You don't want to pay that for a top 20 player. You'll pay that for a top 10 player, but if he's top 20 or top 30, and nobody knows the toll that quad injury has taken on his body, that he's going to play, but will he be diminished in some way? And I do think perhaps his value could rise again by getting on the court and being the player that he was. But you're waiting. Then you're really going to play this out in the training camp, and it'll hang over everything they do. To me, it's hard to imagine him walking back in the doors. I think it's hard for him to imagine walking back in, but he is under contract, and if he wants to get paid next year, he's going to have to show up.
Again, from Woj, and my thanks to Dusty Garza and the folks at the Spurs Report page for posting that. I think that's so interesting, right? So I think most people from the outside looking in think he's got no leverage. The Spurs have no leverage because Kawhi's going to be a free agent after next year, and so all the leverage basically resides with Kawhi Leonard and where he wants to go and all that other stuff. And I think the Spurs are trying to play up whatever leverage they have. So one, they're not offering him the Supermax, so he's upset about it. Two, they still control his rights in the final year of his contract, and just as Woj pointed out, like, he was a top 3, probably a top 5 player before this quad injury, but he basically sat out the entire year for this quad injury. So how's he going to come back? Is he going to be a top 20 player? Is he going to be a top 30 player? Because, I mean, obviously, if he is a top 10 player and teams see that, then there's major trade value for him. So you almost wonder if the play for the Spurs in this situation is, hey, let's have a discussion with him as we get closer to training camp and tell him we're not going to offer you the Supermax, but we are going to allow you to play with this team and show the rest of the league that you still have the value you still have. Because if you don't, you hit free agency basically having not played for 2 years. And do you think you're going to be able to get the type of money in the open market that you think you're going to dictate after basically sitting out for 2 straight years? So it certainly behooves the Spurs for Kawhi to play again. It certainly behooves Kawhi Leonard to play again and to show people that you're still that great player that you were before the quad injury. But I think that's why it's not just for Philly and Boston and other teams in the East. It's not just that, they don't know if he's going to sign there long term, and so there's reluctance there to pay big for a guy that they don't know if he's going to sign there long term. I think the other components of that too are how will he come back from this quad injury? I mean, he basically an organization that's a highly respected and arguably the best ran organization in all of sports. How would he treat them? I don't know that I've said all along I think he's getting bad advice, but I think he's getting bad advice because here's a guy that's an introvert that doesn't want to speak publicly, that has had controversy surrounding him for 10 months and has spoken publicly twice. So, it's bad advice for him to be told, hey, we got to get you to L.A. or Philadelphia, where the media will eat him alive and the fans will eat him alive if he pulls this kind of stuff. Kathy Cardenas says, exactly. How are you, Kathy? Alex Morris says, I think it would be better to wait to the trade deadline so the Spurs can show the league he still has a top 5 player, and when they make him available, teams will flood RC's phone. Supposedly, Kawhi is open to signing a long-term contract. I mean, who knows? But I do think, and Alex, I mean, you kind of got to it as well. I mean, I do think a lot of teams want to see him play, and that if Kawhi, basically sat out this entire year, that he'd be substantially diminishing his value within the open market and what teams would be willing to give up for him on the open market. What have the Spurs played the situation wrong? Jonathan Evans on the San Antonio Spurs Spirit page says, love the show. Great insights. Appreciate you saying that, man. Hit the share button. Also, make sure to subscribe to the Facebook page at facebook.com/watch Phantom. Todd Tangeton on the Ari Temkin radio page says it's $219 million, but it doesn't have to be that total. The Supermax can start at 30% of the team salary cap. That's that 219 is full 35%. Todd Tangeton says also, it gets interesting with Team USA. Pop is coach and Kawhi is part of that player pool, and the players meet with Pop later this month, July 25th to July 27th. Yes, and thank you for bringing that up, because that was something else I meant to bring up at some point. That is very, very interesting, right? You know, that we have Kawhi as part of the player pool for Team USA basketball that can compete in the Olympics. That camp starts as July 25th through July 27th, and obviously Pop is the coach. So, you know, one, will Kawhi participate? If he does participate, how will the relationship with Pop be? So I think, like, part of the Spurs strategy in this entire situation is understanding that they're going to have more, you know, Pop will have more FaceTime with Kawhi, you know, coming up here, and that maybe they could have more discussions in depth about this entire situation, right? So, you know, I think the Spurs still believe they hold a lot of the cards because they still haven't offered him the Supermax, and, you know, he can sign it up until the start of the regular season if they do, in fact, offer it. And if that's what he wants, then he certainly has to, you know, behave well for the Spurs so that the Spurs feel justified in offering him that deal. But I think the Spurs also look at this the same way most other organizations do too and say, what Kawhi are we getting? Are we getting the top 5 Kawhi? That's one of the best two-way players of the game, or are we getting, as Woj just pointed out, a top 20 Kawhi or top 30 Kawhi? Because, remember, the final year of that Supermax is going to pay him $50 million. The final year is $50 million. So, at that point, what will he be? Will he be top 20? Will he be top 30? Will he be top 50? And that is why the Supermax, though it looks like the Spurs would be crazy given the current circumstance to not offer it to him, that's why it's more than just a easy thing for them to just, you know, just blindly offer it to him. That's why there's other pieces involved here. Let's see, Jose Luis in the house. What up, what up, what up? My favorite Lakers fan is here. Adam Connolly says, what do you think it would take to get him in a trade? What do I think it would take to get Kawhi in a trade? Man, that's a great question. Future draft picks, probably some, you know, I think Boston, Jaylen Brown, and the Kings pick, I think that would get the job done. I think Markelle Fultz and maybe some future draft picks could get the job done. I think Kuzma and Ingram could get the job done with Lakers. You know, but as Denise Lamb says, I agree. He's going to have to prove to other teams that he's still that quality player that he's been viewed as. And not just that he's, you know, that he's still a top 5 player. You know, how many what will it, you know, again, if Kawhi Leonard, if the rumors are that he's going to sit out next season, you know, if that's the rumor that he's, I mean, a guy that sits out for 2 straight years, like, one, people aren't going to know exactly how good he could be, and 2, most important to that is, you know, that's a difficult thing to do, to just play on the side, to just, you know, play pickup ball and get ready. Like, there's nothing that could supplement actual game play, and for 2 years, you know, to just sit out, man, that's just not easy to just. That's just not an easy thing to come back from. Daniel Zapata says, I'm hoping that Kawhi has a change of heart and know the best place for him is San Antonio. Look, I think he's upset now. I think this whole situation gets to the point where Kawhi says he wants out and he doesn't want to play for the Spurs anymore because the Spurs aren't going to offer him the Supermax. I think the Spurs met with him. They said, here's the contract we want to offer you. It was not the Supermax. Oh, and by the way, we don't want to deal with your uncle anymore. We want to deal with an actual agent because we didn't like the way that this entire situation went down. So if you're Kawhi, you go into this meeting think you have all the leverage. You think they're going to offer you the Supermax, and so now it'll be your decision to figure out, do I want to sign that Supermax or do I instead want to pursue playing elsewhere? And instead, the Spurs do an about-face in a sense. Like, the Spurs are like, no. Not only are we not going to offer you the Supermax, we also are going to tell you that we don't want to deal with your uncle anymore because we hate how this entire situation was handled. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to pay you that much money over that length of time without having any control over you whatsoever, or even having discussions with you and being sort of out of the loop. So the Spurs basically, I think, hit Kawhi with a complete shock by basically telling him, we're not going to offer you the Supermax, 1, and 2, we don't want to be dealing with your uncle anymore. And that's why I think he got so upset. That's why I think he leaks the information about wanting to be traded, wanting to be out, saying that he's done in San Antonio. All these things that have happened over the course of the last 2-3 weeks are all because the Spurs basically played this entirely how Kawhi Leonard didn't think they'd play it. Denise Lamb, hashtag no Supermax. Hashtag no Supermax. I agree, Denise. I completely agree. One, because most importantly, Kawhi Leonard quit on this team and was unwilling at all to show any commitment to this team, this organization. That's one. Two, greatness is fleeting. And though he's great right now, he has to continue to work even harder than he's been working over the course of the last few off seasons in order to stay and improve and get better. And again, this guy has proven over the course of his career an insane work ethic. Okay? You cannot question that. He went from being a 3-and-D guy as a mid-lottery pick to being one of the 3 best players in the NBA. All credit to him. Credit to the Spurs for helping, but all credit to him for putting in the work throughout the summer to become that great. So, but now all of a sudden he's got all these other things that are swirling inside of his head. Now he's got, the shoe contract and endorsement deals and all these other things that could completely deviate him from what should be most important to him. And, if you're the Spurs, you see that. You know how hard this guy's worked every offseason, and now you know that he's got all these other things that he's worried about and all these other things swirling in the back of his mind that have you sort of concerned of, well, if I give this guy $50 million in the last year of his contract of this Supermax, which would be 6 years from now, what kind of player am I getting? So, Denise, I'm with you on the hashtag no Supermax. I think you do have to see certain things from Kawhi Leonard that will be like, okay, now I can feel comfortable and more confident offering that guy that much money and that much of a long-term commitment. Nathan Ollinger says he isn't going to sit out. It will hurt him in the market. Yeah, but I think in the back of his mind, he knows that he can basically he can get a deal from the Lakers regardless. I think that's in the back of his mind. So even if it hurts his it hurts his value in the open market, that he still thinks he can get that deal with the Lakers even if he doesn't play all year next year. Offer him 3 years at $90 million is what Nathan Ollinger says. June Anthony Anat says, is he the same player when he gets back? That's why it's so hard to give him the Supermax. Yeah, completely agree. Jose Luis says, it's not just a Kawhi Leonard problem. This organization also made mistakes. What kind of mistakes do you think that is, Jose? Hit the share button if you wouldn't mind. I'm Ari Temkin, broadcasting live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, everywhere. We are. It's Phantom, Facebook's, the New World Order of Sports Media, delivering live sports content to social, facebook.com/Watch Phantom. And obviously, there's been so much going on with Kawhi Leonard over the course of the last 10 months or so. And, again, I what I find to be sort of most interesting is I don't disagree that the Spurs played points of this regular season wrong with Kawhi. However, I think Kawhi Leonard and his uncle and his agent sort of they created this problem that backed the Spurs into a corner to where now all of a sudden you've got Tony Parker and Ginobili and Pop saying these things about him. Jose Luis says, one, handling his health care. Okay, and again, if there's a legitimate gripe from Kawhi, then I understand that. I'm not going to second guess the Spurs doctors because I'm not going to second guess any doctors. But if Kawhi Leonard thinks they mishandled this injury, then I'm going to take Kawhi Leonard at his word and say, though I'm not going to second guess the Spurs doctors. Okay, I see that. But to completely cut off communication with the Spurs in light of this, I mean, the Spurs basically paid, as they had to through the CBA. They paid for him to go seek a second opinion, and then all of a sudden there was a point in time where they cut off communication between he and this second opinion. And that's where I think the Spurs got so upset was he leaves, he goes to New York, they don't have much communication with him. Everything that they have with communication-wise is being funneled to his uncle. And they're like, wait a second, we're paying you $21 million this year, you're in New York, and we don't even have communication with you? That's why I think the Spurs are like, hey, by the way, we're not going to offer you the Supermax, and by the way, we don't want to deal with your uncle anymore. Get yourself a real agent. And that's why he got all pissed off. because he's like, you're going to offer me the Supermax, and my uncle's going to continue to take care of this stuff. And the Spurs, no one player is bigger than the entire Spurs organization. Up two, Jose Luis says, allowed pride to get in the way. They let info out. Yeah, and I argued that at some point as well. That the Spurs were always this organization that prided itself on not letting their ego get in the way, and certainly I think there was an issue of, if Kawhi and his agent and uncle then second guessed the Spurs doctors, and then you are basically like, who are you to question us? We're the Spurs. That's an ego thing, right? So that's letting your ego get in the way of the organization, and I get that. I just think Kawhi Leonard, his uncle, and his agent, they started from this vantage point of he wants to get out, and the way they handled the entire regular season with there's a date that he's going to come back and then he's not going to come back, and then the Spurs didn't even have control over his his rehab, that that sort of exacerbated this issue, this friction, and that it starts with Kawhi completely unwilling to meet the Spurs in the middle in any capacity. It's one of the most bizarre situations in sports. And what I find to be most bizarre about it is the fact that this organization has had so much success over the last 4 or 5 decades, and really even more the last 2-3 decades, with two players that were completely selfless, that put the best interest of the organization first. And, Tim Duncan, I've always argued, is the greatest teammate in the history of the game. And if you want an example of what that means, look at what's happened here now. That Kawhi Leonard, the situation that he's presented to the Spurs is sort of how the rest of the NBA functions. And, Tim Duncan was so great that for 2 decades, basically, the Spurs were, didn't have to deal with the realities of the NBA because he always put the best interest of the organization before anything else. But I wouldn't even say that, well, now welcome to what everybody else deals with the NBA, because this situation in particular hasn't really happened in the rest of the NBA. Nathan Olinger says, I really believe the Spurs control this whole situation. Kawhi under contract 1 year. The Spurs have cap to rebuild without him or add player around him. So Spurs win no matter what. I could see that. But I also think, they've got LaMarcus Aldridge. They've got, what they think to be a future star, DeJounte Murray. Like, certainly they've got pieces, but, I don't know that it's a win-win. I guess I'll say that. Losing Kawhi Leonard, what they end up getting for him, if they do end up getting something for him, you just don't rebound really quickly from losing a guy with that kind of a skill set, and that's that good. I guess, and ultimately to answer the question of the Spurs playing the Kawhi situation wrong, and what I really mean is, have they played the most recent situation, the last few weeks wrong throughout this offseason? If the Lakers never offered Kuzma and Ingram and future picks, then they haven't played anything wrong. If they ever got an offer from the Sixers for Simmons or for Fultz or for future draft considerations, same with the Boston Celtics, if they ever got offered Jaylen Brown and future draft picks for Kawhi, then they probably have played the situation wrong. But at the same time, they know, again, that they still hold major leverage because, one, he's got to play for them next year. He's still under contract for them. And two, they can still offer him the Supermax, which is what he wants. He showed his cards. Kawhi Leonard showed his cards. Kawhi Leonard showed his cards. He wants the Supermax. Spurs haven't offered it to him. And in leverage negotiations, anytime you show your cards, you're in trouble. Don't show your cards. Keep them close to the vest. Don't show the people you're negotiating with what you want. Because as soon as you show them what you want, you've given up the leverage that you have over them because now they know what you want. All right, I'm Ari Temkin, broadcasting live right here on Phantom every single day at noon. So check us out, noon Central. A lot more to talk about and get to with this Kawhi Leonard situation. I'm sure we'll have a lot more on this tomorrow, so make sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube, on Facebook, And make sure to follow and get notified every time I go live right here on Phantom, the live sports network on digital, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, everywhere you are, we are. And a lot more to get to when it comes to the Kawhi Leonard situation. Again, I think, if Boston or Philly offered Jaylen Brown and future draft picks, or Philly offered Markelle Fultz or Ben Simmons and future draft picks, then the Spurs might have played this Kawhi situation wrong by not dealing him when they had that option. But if the Lakers never really offered much, then they haven't played the situation wrong, that they've probably played the situation as perfectly as you can, and that they have to wait and see what Kawhi Leonard ends up doing and what he decides to do. Play the long game with this. Again, he has until the start of the regular season, October, to sign him to the Supermax. Joanne Hernandez says, got to admit, if we lose Kawhi, we will not be a championship contender team. Yeah, I agree with that. But the truth of the matter is, with as good as Golden State is, how long is that window? And, Klay Thompson's contract comes up after this year. Draymond Green's contract comes up after this year. So, how long will Golden State's window stay open? All right, again, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you everybody for joining. Thank you everybody for your comments, for your participation. I'm live again tomorrow at noon Central. And if you're in San Antonio, make plans to join me all next week. I'm going to be broadcasting Showtime live at the Ticket Sports Pub in downtown Houston. It is my final week at San Antonio. I am moving a week from Saturday. So come hang out with me my final week at San Antonio at the Ticket Sports Pub in downtown San Antonio. Be part of the show for Showtime. Plus, Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, Showtime from 12 to 1 Central, and then the semifinals of the World Cup start right after. So perfect place to be watching the semifinals of the World Cup, the Ticket Sports Pub, downtown San Antonio on Houston Street. But for now, I am out. Make sure to stay tuned because coming up next, my buddy TJ Carpenter with Noon O'Clock. That's coming up next. Thank you, everybody, for watching, for joining the show, and for being a part of the show today. I'm Ari Temkin.